All right. Well, it is good to see everybody here. I know we got several who are already weighing in, and yeah, good. Lots of people checking in. Good to see everyone. Good to see the Degollados there. Cool. So looking forward to talking with everyone again tonight. We've got not too many lessons left in this series. I know we've done kind of an extended series. I'm still kind of sorting through what I think I want to do from here. I have some idea, but I will let you know. But good to have everyone. Let me get on over to my slides for the evening. There we go. I went ahead and typed this link out in the comments that if you haven't already signed up to get the text message reminders, I do try to send those every week. Good to see everybody here. Oh man, the sisters are together viewing. That's fun. Thanks, Kathy and Brenda. And the Alleys are also present, and McCain. So yeah, good to see everybody here. Um, all right. So as we are kind of winding down the last two or three lessons for this study, um, what I wanted to talk about this evening is solving your solvable problems. Um, in a marriage, especially, I mean, you can have bad things happen, actions that people take that cause sort of, I hate to ever use a term like irreparable, but there can be some decisions made that just everything after that point is different, right? Like there are some watershed, game changer types things that people can do, some of which are very bad. And in those circumstances, it may take more than just a couple to work out their problem. Sometimes you really might need to seek out additional help, counsel, therapy. There's some high level stuff you can deal with if it becomes necessary. But fortunately, many, if not most, of our problems and disagreements are things that we are capable of fixing on our own. One of the one of the dilemmas for me and even working through this stuff is like you want to give examples of some of the kinds of things you've fought about in your own marriage, and I'm going, so many of the things we've argued about really were so inconsequential that I couldn't begin to tell you what most of them were. There's a few doozies we've gotten into, but a whole lot of stuff really isn't that big of a deal. You just have to learn how to work through it and keep things together. So I do want to say for most things, you can solve it. And so we're going to talk about some healthy approaches to how to go about solving our solvable problems. As we do this, I wanted to reference a few scriptures that I thought were interesting. The Council of Jerusalem in Acts chapter 15. I feel like we don't give this passage enough of a hearing. Churches of Christ have focused so much on our autonomy. That is, we're self governing. We don't have any higher church structure beyond the local eldership. Churches down the road, like, we don't really have anything to say about what any of the other churches do. They don't get to have any say about what we do. But we really do, I think, sometimes emphasize our autonomy to the point that we lose something where unity is more possible. That okay, maybe we don't have authority over the churches down the road, but if you want to talk about a scriptural model, you don't see the churches in Acts 15 basically not having anything to do with each other, right? They are definitely united in the mission. They're gathering to talk about theological issues. So let's look at this example. I feel like this is something we should, again, I think we should look at more often than we do. Acts chapter 15, they're having a dispute about the law. You have these, what you would call Judaizers, Christians, or at least people going as Christians, who are pretty well insisting that in order to be a good Christian, you must also fulfill the obligations of the law of Moses. That's a big contentious thing, and this is one of the first major times that they duke it out. And let's be clear, what we're talking about is for them a very significant matter, because up until the time of Jesus, up until, in fact, his resurrection from the dead, all the Jewish stuff is still intact and in play. These are people who were born and raised for generations and generations as practicing Jews who follow the law of Moses. And to suddenly start acting as if the things that your whole relationship with God were based on are now, in the category of, optional, not necessary things. That's a hard thing to wrap your mind around. It is a hard thing to sort out in the actual practices of the church, especially when, if you've got a church that's predominantly Jewish Christians, people who are ethnically Jewish, who are raised Jewish, it's not even something they have to think about. It's just the culture. It's the way they've always done everything. So trying to figure out how to be Christians together with Gentiles who don't share that background, it was really disruptive. It was really disruptive for them. So I want you to notice, I'm not going to read all of this chapter, but Acts 15 is worth a good read and reflection. Some of the things I like about this, okay, they've got a legit conflict, and it is a serious conflict. It's over matters of Scripture and what to do with Scripture. This is heavy-hitting stuff. They start off by just getting together. So they don't lob insults at each other from a distance. They're not backbiting. They actually do get together, including everyone, regardless of how they feel, on the big issue they're going to talk about. You have the ones who think we should really lean on the Old Testament requirements. You have others who say you just can't do that anymore because now we're in Christ and it's a new ball game. But they start off by getting together, and as they get together, they take time to hear reports on what all has been going on in the mission work, which is such a nice way to validate each other. It's like, hey, we have some strong disagreements on this issue, but you know what? You're doing great work for the Lord. First, let's start and update me on what you've been doing. Encourage me with your stories, your successes, the mission reports. Give us all the details about how things are going in your ministry. So there's kind of that fundamental level of respect that is a healthy thing, I think. They also state the issue clearly. That pops up. So one person finally says, okay, we've shared a lot of pleasantries. Here's the thing. Here's what I'm feeling. Here's why I'm feeling this way. Here's what I wish we would do about it. Some person finally just throws it all out on the table. As they discuss this, it says there is extensive discussion. There's a lot of prayer. It's really a big group effort to discern together what God would want them to do and what scriptural teachings they are going to enforce and how they're going to enforce them. And I like their goal. They said, our goal is not to make things difficult. You always have these people who want to go hard-lined and like, no matter what, line in the sand, it's my way or the highway. And if you're not willing to do all 15 of these things, well, you might as well just be on the outside completely. But no, they say, let's not make this any more difficult for anyone than we absolutely have to. So there's a desire not to burden each other, which is, I think, a very Christ-shaped mindset. And then it says that the people that they corresponded with, so they did contact the churches where the Gentile Christians were present. Some of the ones who've been asking the question, well, do I have to be a practicing Jew in order to be a Christian, or do I not? So as they reached out to them, the end result of both their counsel, their coming together, and also their communicating was that people were uplifted and encouraged. So it is possible to get to the other side of a heated conflict in such a way that everyone is valued, and that even though, one side definitely didn't win in terms of what they went with moving forward, it's just encouraging to know that you could have a significant disagreement with someone who is also a Christian and end the disagreement without having to disfellowship each other or label each other something deviant. Like they actually, I think, set us a great example for how to do conflict within the church and between congregations. So this is one, I wanted to share this one quote from it. They say, this is an interesting phrase. I wonder if we should be able to use this phrase more often somehow. They say, it seemed good to the Holy Spirit and to us not to burden you with anything beyond the following requirements. So this is what they said to the Gentile Christians. You are to abstain from food sacrificed to idols, because to them that was really communing with idols. Like, we would say, stay away from the Ouija boards. You don't need to commune with demons, right? Stay away from blood. That was something that they just weren't going to be able to get past. And they say the meat of strangled animals is another thing the law speaks of really harshly that Gentiles were kind of thought of for being associated with. And also from sexual immorality. They say you will do well to avoid these things. And so they tried to think of, in order for Jews and all their sensibilities, notice here they're not saying, here are the hard, fast rules that everyone must abide by or you're lost. What they say is, okay, we really want to work together, and here's kind of the common denominator. If you will please avoid these four things, which, let's be honest, these are not huge things to have to avoid. Meat sacrifice to idols, touching lots of blood, strangled animals, and sexual immorality. The things that are kind of stereotypically associated with pagan Gentiles. I say if you would avoid those things, you would do very well. And those are the things that we would ask and require. But beyond that, we don't want to burden you with anything. And considering all the different aspects of the Jewish law, it's a really generous posture, I think. And again, the Gentile Christians were very pleased with the correspondence they received. So it seems that with God's help, they discerned that one well. Great example of a significant conflict that got solved in a way that I think is admirable. Proverbs 16, verse 7. Here's another verse I like. When a man's ways please the Lord, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him. I believe it is often the case that what is good for the church is also good for your marriage. What is very good for your marriage is also good for the church. And if we make it our goal to please God and to walk in God's ways, when we're talking about our spouses, certainly, hopefully, we are not talking about our enemies. But if you make it your greatest goal in life, first and foremost, to be a Christian, to let the love of God live in your heart, the fruit of the Spirit to be abundant in your life, if you're trying to be that kind of person, a lot more people will have peace around you. You'll be a peacemaker, a peace bringer, and that's a nice goal. And I think he's using that here, talking about just general interpersonal stuff, but I think certainly that must be true in our committed relationships as well. Colossians chapter 3. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with, think about this in a marriage context, relationship context, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience, bear with each other, and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. I hope that you could read through those words and see why that's a pretty fitting passage to reflect on solving problems in a marriage. Don't you think all of his suggestions here would help rather than hurt? Man, we're really having a heated discussion. We're having a hard time even talking about this thing. Well, be sure you include compassion and kindness. Be humble, be gentle, be patient, bear with each other. Grievances happen. Sometimes in the heat of the moment, you do something regrettable. Forgive each other for those. This is all pretty great advice, isn't it? I think a lot of our content for the evening is going to align pretty well with this passage in Colossians, but that's a good passage to highlight in your Bibles. Keep nearby, Colossians 3, 12 to 14. And then finally, Ephesians chapter 4, verses 26 and 27. In your anger, do not sin. Boy, isn't that easy to do. Just to get angry and you open some doors that shouldn't have been opened. You say some things you can't take back. You can apologize, but there may still be scars. In your anger, don't sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. So, in contrast to all the qualities we just saw in Colossians, if you decide to permeate your relationship and your household with anger, impatience, and grudges, where you just hang on to stuff and you refuse to talk and you go to bed and you're still mad and you wake up the next day and you're still mad, the end result of that is that the devil has a foothold into your house. He's got a firm place to stand, because as long as you're hanging on to bitterness and refusing to reconnect and refusing to be kind or gracious or forgiving, to treat the other person the way you want to be treated, as long as you're refusing to do any of those things, Satan is right there driving a wedge, and sadly doesn't take very long, does it, for things to get worse. It's another good passage to reflect on. So I'm going to be talking to you this evening about problem solving. And I am interested in hearing from you. What is your best problem-solving advice? All your years of wisdom, relationship experiences, when you've got a problem with someone, how do you go about solving it? Maybe I should say, rather than how you typically do it, maybe I shouldn't assume you're doing this well. When it's gone really well, what have you done? What are the things you've been told you ought to do that would help a lot with working out problems with another person? Feel free to continue writing your comments. I am interested in your responses. What is your best advice for proactively working out problems in a relationship and in a family? Meanwhile, just to mention for any of you who are tuning in, we are here every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. I am live on Facebook on our King's Crossing Church of Christ fan page, as well as in the members group. And we're also live on our YouTube channel. And if you're making comments in either of those places, I can see and interact with those comments. So glad to have you chime in from any of these formats, because I get all of them in a feed that I can look at. And would invite you to like our fan page, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We would appreciate your support. My good friend from college, Will Brown, says, listen carefully before speaking. That's some good biblical advice, Will, that we want to be slow. We want to be quick to listen, but slow to get angry, right? We want to listen really well, and not just pretending to listen where I'm just catching my breath waiting to go on a counterattack. But okay, so this is what you're saying. Help me understand. Why is it that you feel that way? What is it that's creating this anxiety you're having about this? All the questions you can ask to really try and understand. So I think that's good, Will. Talk about them in love. Don't hide the elephant in the room. What's the thing about the elephants, Joe? The thing is, we just pretend that they're hidden, right? It's a big game of pretend. When there's an elephant in the room, everybody knows it's there. At least at a subliminal level, we all know that they're there. So yeah, it's better. There are many times where being a peacemaker can involve just overlooking an offense. Okay, she said that, or I said that, and hopefully she'll just give me a pass and say, okay, he was grumpy this morning. He was a little grumpy this evening. She was a little hungry, Okay, that was regrettable, but that's not deep down what they really feel. That's just kind of, it was a bad moment. Let's just call it what it was and move on. Sometimes it's better to just move past things, but there are many times, if it really is a problem, you don't make anything better by refusing to talk about it. I tell people often in the marriage counseling that the only problems you can't solve are the ones you won't talk about. It's the problems you won't talk about, pretend aren't there, refuse to acknowledge. Those are the ones that really wreck relationships and marriages. Even if you're fighting about the problem, as long as you're talking about the problem, at least we're being honest about what's going on. And so the elephant in the room is described and dealt with, not just treated, not just treated as if it isn't there. Because when everyone's not being honest about what's going on, you can't really get much done. We all fall short in different areas. That is correct, Gene. That is correct. And Randall's saying something similar to what I was just saying. First, decide whether it is actually a problem that needs solving. Don't just fight over everything. I know different people have different criteria, perhaps, for how they sort that out. Sometimes I like to try and utilize a year from now, 2 years from now. This was something I used to think about a lot when I was in Little League sports, and I would watch some of these parents. My parents were always very supportive and calm. Like, we just, I don't know, like, I'm not that competitive of a person to begin with, but some people just absolutely lose their mind when watching like kids sports. And I remember even as a teenager watching some of these parents just totally embarrass themselves and thinking like, no one's even going to care about this game between these 9-year-olds 2 months from now, much less 10 years from now. But that's true of a lot of our other arguments as well. The things we get all worked up over, like, is this something that really is worth making such a big deal about? Does it really matter to me? Or again, once I've had a good meal and gone for a walk outside, would it kind of go away on its own? Worth asking that. Yeah, it's not worth fighting on everything. Yes, be ready to compromise. Yes, Sandy, compromising means, it doesn't mean that one of you always has to be the doormat so that the other gets their way. Compromising means that, hey, I care about this. I have something at stake in this, you care about this, and you have something at stake. And we find some way to make sure both of us are getting at least some of what it is we're wanting, and certainly part of what it is that we're needing. We'll talk some more about compromise. And Sandy, that is a good direction to go with that. Yeah, be ready to compromise. And again, sometimes I know people who are very placating and nice to say, well, I just try to compromise and if you dig a little deeper, so what does that mean? Well, basically it means the other person just pitches a hissy fit and gets their way, and this person always becomes the doormat, right? So don't be the doormat. Both of you deserve to have personhood and agency, but compromise, be kind, and work together. Choice of words. I appreciate your concern. And yes, your words definitely have the ability to fan the flames or to soothe the situation, don't they? That's good, Frank. Thank you. Yeah, pick a time to discuss so that you won't have any distractions. I think that's healthy, Cheryl Lynn. Yeah, let's sometimes. Hey, we're gonna have to talk about this. Can we talk about it this afternoon? Like, let's set a time so that I'm not distracted by this, and this. And but yeah, agreeing on a time together, that's one way to begin in a healthy fashion where you've compromised at least on when are we going to have this discussion, and it is going to happen. Boy, this is, Cheryl, this is good advice. I think not just about your spouse, but really also about your children. I really believe that children are self-fulfilling prophecies. I have shared stories with you all, I think sometimes in sermons or classes in various contexts about, being in youth ministry for several years and, working with churches for several years often is kind of you're kind of the third party in a lot of your connections and relationships. A lot of times you go to church with a bunch of people who are related to each other, so they have a hard time being objective in a situation. But people who complain constantly about their spouses or who talk badly about their kids, especially like within earshot of their kids, man, I really think you perpetuate a lot of problems and frankly create a lot of problems, because if the way you always speak of your children is to say, well, you know how teenagers are, they just give you lots of problems. Well, what do you like? What is your teenager's expectation for themselves if that's all you ever told them they're going to do? I've watched that happen numerous times. Yeah, I think complaining, you go home and you talk to each other openly and honestly, but that's not something you need to air in front of everyone. Like, what do you have to gain by making your spouse look bad and lose face in front of other people? It certainly is not going to help you work out the actual issue, but yeah, doing stuff to humiliate each other, not good, not good at all. So I want to push back on your statement here just a tad, Joe. As a guy, learning you don't have to win, some things just don't matter. I think it's both sexes, isn't it? I mean, but don't both of us, like, certainly we should be accommodating to each other, but I don't want to lean on that stereotype too much that it's like always the guy who's wrong. I'm kind of, I guess I'm always kind of pushing back on the Homer Simpson persona a bit in terms of like males. Are we all just idiot oafs with nothing to contribute? Like, I know you're a smart guy, Joe, and I know that, in every situation, I like to think that we both have something to say, and important for both of us not to always just try and win. But that's not just a guy problem, maybe stereotypically so, but let's acknowledge that both of us can sometimes be a little too inclined to argue and push on each other. So thank you for those comments, though. Great feedback, everyone. Okay, so here's what we're going to walk through tonight as we go. Steps for solving problems. We're going to talk about each of these in a little more length, but first of all, use a soft startup. Frank and Becky were commenting on this. Be thoughtful with your words. Be gentle. Use a soft startup. Learn to make and receive repair attempts. We talked about this in a previous week, that bids for connection, like all the different ways where you might say, okay, it's been a little tense, but hey, here's something funny, or hey, here's something that made me think about you. And do you allow the other person kind of back in? Make and receive repair attempts. Important that both of you work at that. Soothing yourself and each other. Compromise, as Sandy brought up, and then also processing grievances so that they don't linger. That showed up in the Colossians passage, didn't it? That where there is a grievance, where someone has wronged the other, forgive. Forgiving doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. Forgiving may mean we really have to talk about what happened, but still, I'm going to find a way to be united with you as we move forward, irrespective of what it is that went wrong. Like, we'll talk about what went wrong, but we're gonna find a way to move forward past it. But to Joe's point about the elephants in the room, if there is a grievance, you're not doing anybody any favors by just pretending that it's gone away. Thinking about what a soft startup looks like, got some a good comment from Frank and Becky a few minutes ago. Choice of words. I appreciate your concern. That's a gentle way. Like say one of you just kind of loses it and lays into the other a little bit verbally, to say, hey, okay, I can see you're upset right now. I think you're very. I can see that you're very frustrated, and I'm acknowledging that. Maybe I'm not completely there with you, but okay, acknowledging that. That's a good soft way to begin. Fine to include comments about how I share some responsibility for this. Okay, I see you're really frustrated about the dishes, or you're really frustrated about this other thing that didn't get done, or I was supposed to help you with it and I didn't. So yeah, be willing to own. In our relationship, it's a two-person thing. I've got to have some responsibility for what's going on, and so I may be frustrated with you, but I'm also going to own the fact that, hey, I didn't really come through and do this other thing either. So I'm frustrated by this, but also I acknowledge I'm not the perfect spouse in every way either. Second part of this would be, here is how I feel. So in this moment, this is kind of what I'm feeling. What's useful about that language is that it is not accusatory. So as opposed to just, you're just a big insensitive jerk and you just don't care. It's, hey, right now, here's kind of what's going on. This is what I saw. This is how I feel about that. This is what I'm feeling right now. So I'm not making you own my feelings. I'm not making this necessarily all your fault. I'm just saying, this is how I'm feeling. This is what was done. This is what I saw you do, and this is how I feel about it. So that's honesty. That's clarity. You also want to mention it's about a specific situation. So rather than, oh, well, I just feel like you never help out with anything. Bring up the specific thing that's the problem, right? Like, so here's the specific situation. Last night you said you were going to go take the garbage out and you didn't do it. And it was really frustrating for me today because I needed to do this and the garbage can was full. So leading on to point number 4, here is what I need from you. So here is the thing I wish you would do. Like, and maybe it's just right now, would you please take the garbage out since you didn't last night? Might be as simple as that. But starting off softly, not pointing too many fingers, also trying to acknowledge what you have to do with it, and trying to keep the situation as specific as possible. You can solve little battles pretty easily. If you make everything always a huge war, it's a lot more to sort out, and you get defensive and your emotions get flooded and all that other stuff. So soft startup, good thing. Important with a soft startup to focus on what you do need rather than what you don't need. Rather than saying, can you just stop being so annoying all the time? Or can you just stop always being a whiner, or whatever you're going to say. Be able to say, here's a positive thing I wish you would do. Or just think about if you could give them some sort of magic set of instructions where if they would just do this one thing, suddenly your life would get a lot easier. See if you can find something specific to toss their direction. Like, hey, I'm feeling really frustrated, and here's my part in this, but do you think we could find a way to make this kind of thing happen more of the time? Because that would really, all these other areas would probably seem better to me if we could just get this one thing moving along. So here's an example of something you could say, hey, I know sometimes I can be a slob myself, so there's me acknowledging my part, but I'm frustrated that you walk by the laundry basket without stopping to help fold any sheets. I don't like having to do it all by myself. That's a fine way to start kind of gently, but raise your legitimate protest. This is not someone who is someone else's doormat. I think that's a valuable thing. Yes, this is correct, Kevin. How I feel language helps you give the other person the benefit of the doubt because you can more easily avoid accusing the other person. So how I feel is just how I feel. I'm not saying you did something right or wrong. It's just, this is how I felt about it. And I don't know about you, but I've ended up in several times in my life apologizing to someone, even though like what I did with my actions, I had no malice, I had no bad intentions. They just got received a way that I hadn't intended. So sometimes we apologize for how things are received, even if there was nothing objectively wrong with my actions or my intentions. So worth kind of sorting that out. But how I feel language keeps that in a space, as Kevin points out, that you can really kind of deal with it and grapple with it. I told Abe the other day, I know you said this, but this is what I heard. That's very helpful language, Kathy. Yeah, this is what you said, but this is how it felt to me. Sometimes I will point out, I think I did this Sunday, in fact, talking about faith, how there's kind of like the intellectual level of things where like, okay, here's the information that I think to be accurate information. Here's the things I kind of believe in my head to be true, but believing it emotionally is a whole different deal. So yeah, maybe this is what you said, but under the surface, this is what I'm really wondering what was going on or how it made me feel. And so much of our communication is nonverbal, right? So much of what we do, the wording is important, but the wording is really the icing on the cake. The cake is the way our relationship has been lately, right? There's that foundation of how we've been getting along, and all that other stuff. What was your tone? What was your facial expressions? Because you could be saying really positive things, but if you're busy staring at your phone and not engaging, that could be thoroughly unsatisfying. We were talking a few weeks ago about the ways you want to respond to people, and I'm trying to remember the terms. We had a little grid talking about being proactive and positive, proactive, constructive, whatever that was. But yeah, really kind of engaging and celebrating as opposed to just either trying to demolish whatever their good news is, or changing the topic, or staying on your phone saying, "Oh, great." Nonverbals count for a lot, so that's good. That's important, Randall. One of the things my wife got when she married me was an assistant sheet folder. uh, yeah, those fitted sheets are hard too. I have watched YouTube videos. I have I've been trying for years. I never feel like I get it right. Uh, yeah, I know you think that you believe what you think I said, but you don't realize that what I said is not what I meant. Yeah. Thanks, Gene. Yeah, this is what you think I said, but that's not what I was trying to say. Give me a little slack here, right? Not a bad thing to request. Okay, so soft startup. Next, I want to talk about repair attempts. I'll just say the order in which I've been moving through this content, I think, is significant. So we've talked a lot about building love maps, really getting to know each other's life, getting to know each other's world, the things you care about. Kind of building on that foundation makes everything else a little bit easier. So the happier the rest of your marriage, the easier it is to send and receive repair attempts. If we are trying actively to enjoy each other's company, to bond together, to continue to build our relationship with each other, to stay connected, to know about each other, if that is in play, when there's been a problem and one of you makes an attempt to kind of reconnect, it's easier for that to work. In an unhappy marriage, even the most eloquent attempt can fall on deaf ears. So no matter how well I word my statements or how sincerely I come across, if we're going on the last month of you feeling most of the time like I've been a jerk or I've been unavailable and you're just tired of me already, aren't you a lot less willing to hear something or connect with someone that you're already frustrated with for 15 other reasons? So I think a lot of repair attempt success has to do with how well you're doing all the other stuff. And if all the foundational stuff is going really well, it's kind of like, since these are going well, these other things go well too. And the same is also true conversely. If things are going badly in all the other areas, repair attempts not always so successful. So I wanted to mention those. And we've talked a little bit about bids for reconnection in previous weeks. Okay, also learning to soothe yourself and each other. I believe it was Randall and Cheryl who talked about maybe setting aside a time. Hey, we've got to talk about this. I'm frustrated about it. Let's set aside a time to talk and leave the distractions to the side. That's healthy. Sometimes it might be the case that as you're talking, you find yourself just getting worked up, or you see your partner getting worked up, and it is totally fine to say, hey, can we come back in like 10 minutes and try this again? Or how about, rather than finish this conversation here, can we go for a walk around the block and talk while we walk and see if we can sort through it? I need some fresh air. But if your heart rate exceeds, this is what, according to the Gottman Institute, if your heart rate exceeds 100 beats per minute, you will not hear what your spouse is trying to say. So if you're getting frustrated, your blood pressure is rising, your heartbeat is increasing, it's like physically incapable of hearing them well when your heart is beating that fast. And I think they say that rate would be like 80 beats a minute for athletes. I don't match that category, so for me it would be 100. But they recommend taking even as long as a 20-minute break and then trying again. I did mention in previous weeks that men have a harder time physically calming down than women do. I cannot remember the statistic that I pulled up the other week, but it's like when men really get tense from a conflict or confrontation, women naturally are better at soothing themselves and kind of soothing others. But like a woman can get really frustrated, then she can kind of calm herself. Men just take a long time. We physiologically do take a long time to kind of come back down from a level of high frustration and tension. And so men are a lot more likely to get emotionally flooded. And we've talked about that in some previous weeks where she's kind of ready to go at it more, and I want to talk more, and I want to talk about this, and we have to do it right now. And you'll have a lot more success with the guy if he does need to follow through on whatever time you agree to, but allowing him a little space to self-calm and soothe. Something else that's important about this is that sometimes it's yourself that you need to soothe. Sometimes it's the other person that you need to soothe. So if you're trying to calm yourself, begin by paying attention to your breathing. If your heart's racing and you're breathing hard, taking slow, deep breaths, taking time to kind of acknowledge each part of your body, trying to exhale and let go of things that you're stressing about, finding a comfortable or a beautiful place to sit, surround yourself with things that are relaxing, nice music or something. But if you're really needing to kind of get yourself calmed down, you're absolutely affected by your physical body. So start with your breathing, even if nothing else. Oh, good. Let's see. I got some other comments coming in. Yeah, sometimes this can be helpful, Will. If you cannot speak because of frustration, put your thoughts in writing in a letter format. Sometimes those are letters we throw away, aren't they? But yeah, it might be helpful to write it all down, give it a few minutes, and kind of like writing a term paper or something. You write it, but you need to give yourself another day. I try really hard to get my sermons done. I don't like it if I'm having to put finishing touches on stuff on like Saturdays. Sometimes that happens if a week goes crazy. But I feel like when you're wanting to say something that's meaningful, you should always have at least like you get it done and you have a good night's sleep, and then you look at it again to see what you would say differently. So giving yourself some space between what you put into words and then what you actually end up saying, that's healthy. So yeah, writing things can help you organize your thoughts. So much of the time, especially like I am an internal processor. So when I'm really thinking a lot, I kind of go into my head and I have a hard time being like present in a room, if I'm really kind of caught up in something I'm thinking about. But other people are verbal processors. And if you're a verbal processor, and even if you're not, a lot of times people can solve their own problems if they just find a space to begin talking through them. So, Will, your suggestion about writing the letter down, if you're a verbal processor, putting it into words may go a long way with you sorting out what it is you're trying to say or what it is you're really feeling. Yes, Randall's mentioning the Fitbit. A benefit of a Fitbit is it keeps track of your heart rate. Let's talk about this problem. Yeah, I've got it. Hey, I'm at 94 beats a minute right now. So, yeah, better be careful about this class, Randall, because I may not be listening to the comments that well. Let's see. Got several comments coming in. Is it also true it takes longer for men to get upset? Not necessarily so, right? I think that it kind of depends on the person. Some of us are more even keel. Some of us are more excitable. It is the case that it takes us longer to calm down, I think. Juvenile department, thanks Joe, this is funny. A volunteer program just bought 2 punching bags for detention and long-term lockup. Better hit a punching bag than staff or another kid. Yeah, that's not bad. When I was in college, Joe, sometimes I would feel so stressed for all the things I had to get done. Me and my roommates, suite mates, we got in the habit occasionally of like screaming into pillows. That somehow was really gratifying. The counseling. In fact, we had Ed Gray for Kevin Burr's Sunday afternoon class a few weeks ago, and when I took him for counseling skills, he's given all the standard lecture. The one time he kind of paused and said, "Okay, let's say you've got a person you're talking to, and no matter what you're doing, they're just having a really hard time calming themselves down, and it's like you've got to do something to get them to change gears so they don't do something destructive." You wouldn't send someone out if you thought they would physically harm a person, but like they really may make some bad decisions. He said, if you can't get anything else to work, go buy yourself a pack of styrofoam cups and one at a time rip those cups to shreds. And it's like not that expensive, not that hard to clean up, and somehow that seems to work a lot of the time when nothing else works. Scream into the pillow, don't break stuff. Giving someone time, respecting them enough to give them the space to blow off steam, very important, very important. So as far as soothing yourself, paying attention to your breathing, sitting in a comfortable place, sometimes it might be your partner who, it doesn't help just to say, hey, will you calm down? But, maybe they're responsive to a little massage on the shoulders or something. Now, they may be in one of those moods where they don't want you to touch them, but sometimes it might be a thing where it's like, hey, I'm having a lot of back pain, or I'm having a lot of this that's making me frustrated, and all these other things. Maybe there's something you could do to help soothe each other. Proactively asking that question, what helps your partner feel more at ease? I generally vote for chocolate chip cookie. I tell you, I've done this a couple of times. Like if I'm going to be in a situation where I fear the discussion could get kind of heated, a lot of times I'll bring Chick-fil-A chocolate chunk cookies, because how can you be mad at anything when you're eating one of those things? So what helps you feel at ease? What creates spaces where each of you can vent frustrations? Yeah, bubble wrap is not bad either. Yeah, that's right, Cheryl. Yeah, bubble wrap's a good thing too. All right. So compromise. This is what Sandy brought up earlier. Here's a method you could try that actually borrows a little bit from Will's suggestion of maybe writing a letter. Something else you can do, if you are having a pretty significant disagreement with your spouse on something, and it's becoming clear that this is not going to get worked out real easily just through this discussion you're having, because you both keep getting too frustrated and you keep like beating your head against the same wall. What you can do, you can take a sheet of paper. You can do it one of two ways. You can either make two separate lists, or if you're more of a visual person like I am, draw a big circle and then draw a very small circle inside of it. The big circle, all this is going to be relative to the thing you're arguing about. So whether it's, household responsibilities or sexual fulfillment or whatever it is, make yourself a big circle. And inside the big circle, here's a bunch of stuff I would like to be true about how we handle this, but I don't have to have it this way. So on the inside, these are the things that are core needs, and you don't want to put many at all in that middle circle. But these are the aspects of this conflict that no matter what else, I absolutely will not compromise, cannot not get some of this. So these are the absolute needs of this situation. So pertaining to household chores, for example, it is an absolute need that I am not the only one doing everything. You got to do something around here. But beyond that, here's a bunch of different things I wish you would consider doing. But what you would do is you would have your partner do the same thing on another sheet of paper. And they also would say, we're fighting about this one issue. Well, here's my core needs of what I need out of this. And then here are all the things that I'm kind of open to. And what you might find a lot of times is some of your fighting will be at that preference level where each of you would kind of like it a certain way, and just because it's not getting done at all, you're bringing up your preference, but in fact you wouldn't mind it getting done a different way as long as it got done. So figure out what's the stuff that's kind of negotiable, what's the stuff that's really at the core, and if you sit down and kind of compare those lists, and then from there ask some of these questions. What do we agree about? What are some of there will be some overlap on the topic. So what are some things that we both do think to be true, that we both care about, that we both want out of this? What are our common feelings or the most important ones? So what do we have in common, but then what are the things that seem typical of this? What's really driving us? What common goals can we have? How can we understand this situation or issue? It may become enlightening that as you're sorting through this thing you're fighting about, you might discover that it's really just a symptom of a different problem. And if we were to sort this thing out, these other things would get quite a bit better on their own. A lot of times that's the case where problems sort of stack, and if you can get to the one at the bottom of several, in fact, that's for me always a step when people come to me for counseling, especially if it's like they've got a whole bunch of different things bothering them. I just say, well, go ahead and keep talking for a while. Let's get everything on the table. And so you've told me about this, and this. If there's one of those you could work on, that would probably make the biggest difference. Which of those would it be? And so far, 100% of the time, that person I'm talking to will be able to say, really, I think if I could just do this, that other stuff is not so important. So giving yourself an ability to say, what are some of the preference negotiable issues? What's the thing really at the core that's affecting everything else? So how can we understand it? How do we reframe this so we understand it better? And how do we think we should accomplish these goals? So that's a good method to use for compromising. Processing grievances. Sometimes wrong has been done, harm has been inflicted, and we need to talk about it. We need to deal with it. Remember that emotions and perceptions are subjective. Now, we've already been talking about sharing feelings talk where, hey, this is what happened and this is how I felt about it. We have to remember that when we're discussing stuff, even though as a Christian, I believe in absolute truth, I believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. I believe that God has, this omniscient way of looking down on the world and seeing all things as they actually are. Even though I follow a God who is like that, I myself am not. My only option for dealing with the world is through my subjective, limited point of view, and that's true of every other human being. So let's just remember, as we are working through harm that's been done, you may feel really strongly, or I may feel really strongly, but it's just my perception. It's just your perception. Sometimes things can get quite a bit worse, but generally speaking, start with that assumption. Hey, what I'm telling you right now is not absolute truth. It is my understanding of what's going on. And it's how I'm seeing it. Choose a specific incident. If you've got something you need to talk about, hey, I know we were frustrated about this other thing, but this happened. I'm not okay with it. I need to talk about this thing that happened with you. And so discuss it. Take turns speaking. Take turns really listening. Say out loud what you were feeling when the thing was going on. So this is what you said, and internally, kind of to Kathy's point, like, I know this is what you said, but this is how it made me feel. As a part of that, a helpful thing moving forward is working on identifying your triggers for various reasons. We all have some. I've over the years become aware of 2 or 3 things in my life where I'm like, okay, I know I have a tendency to spiral into, this kind of circular thinking, or if this thing gets said or this thing gets done, I start just reacting to it, even though I haven't really thought about the problem that much. So if you can identify what your triggers are, you can get better at anticipating them, or also getting your partner better equipped to walk around them. So, okay, hey, need to talk to you about this. I'm not trying to say this thing here because I know how you feel about that, but it really is this other thing I need to talk about. Identifying triggers is good. Again, acknowledging your role. So here's this thing we need to talk about. Here's what happened. Here's how it made me feel. Tell me from your perspective what was going on. This is probably part of why I reacted the way that I did. And also, like, here's something I'm bringing to the table, or here's something that I did that may have contributed to it. So having the humility, really getting back to all that Colossians 3 stuff is pretty good. Getting lots of interesting comments here. Don't miss the light changing, or the guy behind you is going to be screaming in his car too. Lucky if that's all they do around here, Randall. This is good. The good news is that I have grown enough that stuff doesn't make me as mad as it used to. That's good news, Joe. That many of us do. I've seen a lot of people, and as they grow older, start to not be so worried about some of the stuff they used to get really upset about. That's a healthy thing, I think. So talking about processing grievances. Okay, so that's a majority of the content I wanted to cover for this evening. I wanted to mention if you don't already have our Church Center app, just go to your app store. It's on iPhone devices as well as Android devices. But search for Church Center. When you see the one that looks kind of like this, download it. It's a free program. And from there, what it will do, you will enter in whatever email address, phone number you have provided us in our church database. And what it will do from there is it'll automatically kind of help you plug in a lot of information in terms of logging in. You don't have to, I don't believe you have to have passwords for this. I think whenever you want to log in, you just say, hey, I'm trying to log in, and you tell it what email address, it sends you a passcode or a link to click, and you automatically get in. The app's useful for a lot of different things. I wanted to mention again, we're excited about some of the events on Easter Sunday. The breakfast this year is for anyone who wants to come, so we're not limiting it just to like families with young children or anything like that. But look here on this screen. If you can see kind of in the bottom left, this is what it looks like inside the Church Center app for us. There's like the home screen, but then there's one called Events. From Events, you click there, and then you would click on the Easter Worship Breakfast and Hunt if you wanted to go to the Easter event. Crystal's requesting that people do let her know if they're coming so that she can have a adequate amount of food, and we're going to be doing it outside. We should be able to accommodate a large number of people, and so would invite you to do that using that Church Center app. Let's see here, a couple more comments. Yeah, identifying your triggers can also help you overcome them. Ideally, you won't continue to be triggered. Yeah, that's right, Kevin. You and I have talked some before about, for me, there was one negative tendency I was recognizing in myself. And part of why I started a website and started blogging again a couple of years ago was my effort to kind of respond positively to what otherwise was kind of a negative trigger for myself. This kind of ongoing mindset that I probably will battle my whole life. So yeah, if you identify them, that's correct. You can get better at dealing with them and hopefully starting to move around them. So great news for everyone is that growth is possible. Getting back to Joe's point from a moment ago, it is possible to get older and wiser, and we should try to get wiser. We absolutely should. So thank you all for your comments. Would remind you to like our fan page. If you like any of the content here, would love to have you share it. Send it in Messenger to someone you think would benefit from it, or share it on your Facebook page. Again, you can go to rmd.at/KC midweek. The first comment from tonight's lesson, I typed out that link. I don't think it made it a hyperlink just because it's kind of an unusual articulation, but you could copy and paste that text and go to that in the browser window. It'll get you set up to get our weekly reminders when we're going to go live. And as always, if you got questions about anything, if there's something you want to ask me about, if there's something you're interested in learning about, anything at all, I'm glad to have you send me an email to mark@kingscrossingcoc.com. And I think that's about all that I've got for the evening. I've got a couple of comments. Yes, okay, thank you, Raquel. I appreciate that. Good to hear from you. And yes, Sandy, we mellow with age. I certainly hope so. All right. Well, let me say a word of prayer, and we will close things out. Oh, let's see. Whitney is sharing a request. My dad's having a heart cath at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Okay. Well, let's certainly pray for your dad then, Whitney. God, we thank you for all the ways you've been good to us, and for the time we've had here tonight just to discuss trying to reach toward each other, trying to have healthy relationships, and trying to solve the problems that we have as we go. We know, Lord, that so many problems are solvable, and that especially when we embody your love, your humility, your graciousness, that we have such a better prospect for our relationships with other people. So help us to learn from you as we reach for each other. Pray especially for Whitney's dad as he's getting ready for this procedure. Just pray that it can go very smoothly and be uneventful. And so please be with her dad. And we know this will be weighing on her and her family. So be with all them as well. Thank you, Lord, for hearing our prayer. I offer it in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Well, you guys have a wonderful rest of your night, and I look forward, Lord willing, to seeing you on Sunday. Guys, it is starting to feel like we're getting a little momentum again, like we're getting more and more people there, and starting like before COVID hit, we got to where we were regularly having large numbers of people visiting our congregation. We are starting to get the ball rolling on that again. So I am excited about that. It's been way too long. So would encourage you to come. Our class numbers continue to be phenomenal. We're having somewhere between 85 to 92% of our people attending worship are staying for classes, and that is a mind-boggling statistic. So good for everyone for trying to jump back in and support what we're doing. So we appreciate all of you, and appreciate everybody being here this evening. Y'all have a great night.